an overview of phonation, just like we did with respiration. Um, just taking a look at what it is, how it fits in with everything else that you have learned already, everything you will learn coming after this. All right, so if you've had 375, this is absolutely a review for you. If you haven't had 375, it's not. So sound is another way that we can talk about sound is instead of calling it sound, we can call it a sound pressure wave. Um, it's more accurate, but it's it takes more words. So then why say that in your day to day? But all that means is it is pressure in the air that's creating the sound. So you also have to have an oscillation in the air to create the sound pressure wave. If you don't have an oscillation, it's just one wave. So like if you clap your hands, that's just one wave. It creates one single spike of sound pressure that's traveling. It gets to your ears and you hear it as sound, or anything else and it bounces off of it. But that's just one because there's not an oscillation. An oscillation is like on the screen here, you've got a string. So think of this like a guitar string, a violin string, um, a rubber band, any of these things. Um, that you've like stretched out, and then what you do is you just kind of like pluck that and it's going to move, it's going to vibrate back and forth. That's your oscillation. And what that does, you can see here, is that when it moves forward it pushes air one way, when it moves backwards it pushes air the other way. And if you look at, so this is showing you like it's compressing this way, it's compressing this way, but if you think about it, like it's just leaving the string and coming to you. So like an acoustic guitar, Um, it's going to move this way. It's going to push everything together, and then it's going to move backwards. And that air, that pressure wave, is going to travel towards you. I don't want to say the air is going to travel towards you because it's not like it creates wind currents exactly. Because like individual molecules will like stay where they are. They'll move all together, and then they'll kind of come off of that wave front and stay where they are, like water out in the open ocean. So don't think of it as waves crashing against the surface. Think of it as waves out in the ocean. That's more akin to how waves in air are. So they'll move. And it's just this pressure front that keeps moving. And what it's like is here's some air that hasn't been pushed. Here's some air that's coming, and it pushes the rest of this air. It goes back. This air keeps moving, and then it runs into other air. That'll rebound back to where it is. So the motion keeps going. Actual individual molecules don't, but the motion is what we're tracking. That's the pressure wave. So the string will come back. Then there's no front wave front right there. Then the string comes back towards the person that's listening. Then you've got another area of compression. And so there's your oscillation. So you've got, it's like if you could clap your hands many times per second, um, you would set up an oscillation that would create a sound, like a sustained sound that we hear, like the voice. So what's going on in the larynx is that you've got air from the lungs, which remember we went over the lungs a ton. Air from the lungs are going to push out between the vocal folds. Usually, if you're breathing, your vocal folds are abducted, away from each other. But if you're speaking or singing or yelling or anything like that, your vocal folds are adducted, which means they're together. So the air is going to come out between those adducted vocal folds, and it's going to push the vocal folds apart. And then you've got Bernoulli forces and elasticity of the vocal folds that are going to pull the vocal folds back together. Then the air pushes them apart again, then they come back together. And what you get is this oscillation, little tiny puffs of air that sets up an oscillation in the larynx. What it's like, I talked about this in the respiration overview, is like a balloon. Now I have a balloon. Problem with this is I think my microphone is set up to like ignore sounds that aren't in the range of human speech. So we might not have it. Well, let's see. So what we've got here is partially inflated balloon. What I'm doing That was a sound. What I'm doing is I'm going to stretch it. I think most people know this trick from when they're a kid. Some older sibling or cousin or parent teaches you this, and then you annoy the hell out of them with it afterwards. So you're going to stretch it, and what's going to happen in here is it's acting like vocal folds. It seems like, no way, there's no way. It's exactly the same principle. Total, like to a T. Air's pushing out between this stretched uh, rubber. I guess balloons made of rubber. I don't know. Are they silicone? Latex, probably. Anyway, um, so you can stretch this, and that's more like a vocal fold. There, hit the microphone again. And if you get it just right, there we go. Now, this is what I don't know, is if you can actually hear this or my microphone's cutting it out. If you pull it tighter, it'll get higher in pitch, which we're going to talk about in a second. Ah, for a second. Let's try to make it feel really low so we can actually hear it on camera. There it was. You have to put more pressure behind it. Then it dies. Um, that's exactly what's going on in the vocal folds. The balloon is just like vibrating. It lets a little bit of sound out at a time. It's not, I mean, like if you didn't have the vibration in the balloon and the vocal folds, you just get that. So that's exactly what the vocal folds are doing. Same principle completely. Okay. So what that does is it creates a fundamental frequency. That sound right there that you could hear from this, hopefully, if the microphone didn't cut it out, is the fundamental frequency. The the sound that you actually pick up on is the fundamental frequency. And that creates the basis for harmonic overtones, which we're going to talk about when we talk about resonance and articulation, because the harmonic overtones, which are integer multiples of that fundamental frequency, that's what your pharynx, oral cavity, and nasal cavity use to mold into different phonemes. So an ah, e, oo. If you're producing the same fundamental frequency here at your vocal folds, I, what you're doing is you're changing the shape of the harmonic overtones with your mouth, with the resonant cavities here in the pharynx, here in your mouth, the shape of your tongue, and the muscles that are in the pharynx, and that's what's creating different vowel phonemes. Okay, so what else is going on in the larynx is pitch change. So, like I said, if I pull this tighter, it becomes higher pitched. And that is true in the vocal folds as well. So, if we stretch the vocal folds, they become higher pitched, longer, thinner vocal folds create a higher pitch, and these shorter, thicker vocal folds create a lower pitch. Um, Again, that's sort of similar to like we talked about a rubber band. This is the thing I don't have today is a rubber band. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. You're probably not going to be able to hear it. So, who says the pandemic was never good for anything? So, rubber band, low. Can you hear this? And then I stretch it. Right? So this is really, really loose, like that. And then as I stretch, higher pitched. Now, this isn't two things like flapping against each other and cutting up air that's shooting out between them. That's true. It's not like the vocal folds. It's not like the balloon, but these principles are true among all sorts of different acoustic objects. Acoustic object is just anything that creates sound. And so when you put more tension in, it has to vibrate faster. This is true for the vocal folds too. You put more tension in by stretching it, and it's going to rebound faster around the air. So this rebounds faster, but it's just a string. Your vocal folds rebound faster, and they're a set of strings basically that air passes through. So it's a similar function. Okay. Um, what creates that lengthening and shortening of the vocal folds, though, is movement of the cricothyroid joint. Of course, you're going to hear about that a lot. Maybe you've already jumped into it, but the cricothyroid joint is where the cricoid cartilage and the thyroid cartilage come together. And as the thyroid cartilage moves out, it's going to stretch the vocal folds. That creates a higher pitch. And then the thyroarytenoid muscles will bring the cricothyroid joint closer together, which creates a lower pitch. And then one thing we should also talk about, but I already kind of did talk about it, is adduction and abduction. Vocal folds that are open, like on the right here, those are abducted. Think about like aliens abducting the vocal folds away from their homes. And vocal folds that are closed, like on the left here, are adducted, like they're together. They're added together. Um, and this is movement of the cricoarytenoid joint. So the arytenoid cartilages are going to hinge on top of the cricoid cartilage, and that's going to create this open and closed movement, the abduction movement. Vocal folds being abducted are really important for breathing. You want to have a clear, open airway for breathing, which is good. But then you want to have your vocal folds adducted, of course, for speech and singing, but also for things like coughing. What happens during a cough is the same Bernoulli forces that are in the lecture, but kind of to a greater degree. Little Bernoulli forces when we're talking, they're a little bit weaker, but what happens during a cough is you adduct your vocal folds, contract your ab muscles, which we learned about in respiration, and forcefully eject a bunch of air from your lungs. It's so much air, and your vocal folds are adducted more tightly than when you're just speaking, that it's a super like high powered jet of air that comes out. And the Bernoulli forces are going to grab a lot of other junk that's in your lungs and take it along with it and move it out, like into your mouth. Ugh. Anyway, that's coughing. And then also vocal fold adduction is important for swallowing too. Um, the vocal folds will tightly adduct when you're swallowing to help protect, uh, well, to ensure that you don't get any food or drink into your airway when you're swallowing. Um, that's also true of the epiglottis, will come down over the top of the vocal folds and also help make sure that no food or liquid gets in. The larynx also moves up and kind of out of the way to give more room for the esophagus. So all three of those things together protect you from aspirating food and drink. And that's the overview of phonation. It's not the whole thing, but these are the big important points, how they relate to everything. So you kind of use that to like orient yourself in space um, as you go through these modules. Maybe they'll help on the exams to kind of think about how the system all works together.